When we think about Rosh Hashanah, which for me, among other things, celebrates Malchut Shemayim, the sovereignty of the divine, one thing the sovereignty of the divine means is that there is a standard that is sovereign in our lives, that is beyond our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. I said earlier that it cannot be reduced to the Bible, because I think that, or any other legal system, any other text, because these texts come into being through the refractions of the human mind. So therefore, no text is utterly reliable. I mentioned that earlier today. And I also mentioned that even if one did believe that the text is completely divinely inspired, that the text is always internally incoherent and contradicts itself. So you can read one text that might govern a situation and read another text that tells you to do something precisely the opposite. So even if you do believe in an inspired, revealed text, that doesn't relieve us of the responsibility to still find the true thing to do. Again, true to what's happening around us and true to what's happening within us. Now, all of this for me is captured in a line from our portion. I want to take my words from this morning and take them a few levels deeper. We had a great question right at the end, and I want to just expand on that because the question that was asked was the natural next question. And the line that I want to expand on, if you want to look in chapter 29, verse 3, you don't need to go there. I'll go there in just a moment. It says that God did not give you, English translation says, a heart to know or eyes to see or ears to hear until this day. And the Hebrew says God did not give you a lev lada'at, einayim lirot, ve'oznayim lishmoa. So it's a really interesting question, something we've dealt with actually a few years. Phrase here, lev lada'at, a knowing heart, einayim lirot, seeing eyes, and oznayim lishmoa. And clearly the knowing heart is understood as certainly at the deep metaphoric level, but even eyes that can see and ears that can hear. Clearly, we're talking about some kind of inner spiritual apprehension and some kind of inner spiritual ability to hear. So I want to try to unpack these through the lens of the text I spoke about this morning, which is Rabbi Yonah of Gerona, Sha'arei Teshuvah. And I read a few passages earlier today to show that he bids us to really rely on the human capacity for sechel, for some kind of moral intelligence, for hitbonenut, for the capacity to discern between things and so forth. So along with Rabbi Yonah and this line here, I want us to expand this a little bit, this idea of the interconnection between teshuvah, rationality, and spirituality. So I want to share with you that I first studied this book, Sha'arei Teshuvah, many, many years ago when I was a rabbinical student. I had a class in Musar, in what we call pietistic literature or Jewish moral psychology, which I'm of late naming spiritual formation and moral psychology. And for newcomers, I want to unpack that word just for a moment. We have a term in our tradition, the Yetzer Hara. Most of you have heard me use this term many times. And it's normally translated as the destructive urge, but there's an interesting play on words there, because the Hebrew word litzor means to shape or to form, and ra, of course, means destructive or evil or bad. So it has almost a feeling of an oxymoron, because it means a shaping toward destructiveness. And when one looks at one's inner life, especially in moments of stress, one realizes that we almost have a fully formed shadow self, which is own intelligence, its own will, that in many ways is completely contrary to what you might call the higher self or the realm of the soul. So that shadow self is actually, it's a shaped self. It's not random, it's not occasional. If you begin to look at the realm of your flaws, as I mentioned earlier today, if you truly want to apply this idea of Malchut Shemayim, of the sovereignty of the divine, and therefore you want to find the parts of yourself that don't live according to some moral, spiritual standard, and you start to look inside and you find that you have sometimes obsessive or habitual thoughts of either anger, depression, resentment, etc. Or you look inside and you have emotions that you know are not healthy, that alienate you from yourself or from other people. And again, they're habitual, they're ongoing, it's a struggle for you. Or you just have sometimes a bad feeling inside, something just inside of you that doesn't feel connected to the world and connected to others, a sense of distance or alienation. If one does contemplative work enough, you begin to see these are not random thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc. They actually have a shape to them. They actually have something of a form. And when one sees that shaping of the inner life, one realizes, as I mentioned earlier today, that while one can do what I call specific teshuvah, meaning for one deed, one thought, one act of speech, but if you really want to go after this, one has to do what I call a more general teshuvah, and by that I mean a more intentional, proactive reshaping of the inner life, meaning taking that formed shadow self and intentionally either trying to reshape it, which is very difficult and takes lifelong work, or at least shaping the neshama's ability to intervene against the shadow self so it doesn't act in a destructive way. Again, destructive of yourself, your connection with other people, connection with the divine, and certainly so that it should not manifest in speech and action. So when I think of the term Yetzer Hara, for me I have a very deep understanding of it, that it means a shaped part of myself, the shadow self, that I can depend on. But it's very dependable. Probably its only good quality. It is utterly dependable and always awake. I can depend on it to act against my interest to realize my life into a life of goodness, as I described earlier today.